The orphaned Emily Carter discovered that 8 years later, the only thing her deceased family had left her was this worn-down house. Her journey to that house would be anything but ordinary, and when she arrived, she would learn the truth about her family's death, a truth that would profoundly change her life. We'll move on to the rest of the story, but first, have you ever learned a truth about your family that you didn't know before? Please share it in the comments. 8-year-old Emily Carter sat on a plastic chair in the social services waiting room, clutching a golden retriever who was too big to be a lapdog, but seemed to know she needed him there anyway. The dog's name was Shadow. Before the accident, at least before Emily thought it was an accident, her father had adopted the dog and named him Shadow. Now, the dog belonged to Emily. He was the only thing she had left from her family. The social worker, a tired woman named Ms. Patterson with kind eyes and an exhausted smile, emerged from her office holding a manila folder and something small that glinted in the fluorescent light. "Emily, honey, I need to talk to you about placement." Emily's grip on Shadow tightened. The dog whined softly and licked her hand. "We found a temporary shelter that can take you. Sunshine Haven, about an hour from here. It's a group home for children awaiting permanent placement. They even allow pets so Shadow can come with you." "Temporary," Emily repeated. That word affected her deeply because nothing in her life was permanent anymore. Temporary homes, temporary families that weren't truly hers, temporary safety. How do you think Emily can cope with this emotional struggle? Her parents had died 3 weeks ago in a car accident. Not long ago, Emily had a normal life like everyone else. School, friends, and a swing hanging from the tree in her suburban backyard. But after a while, all of it was gone. The police said it was just an accident. They claimed her father had swerved late at night to avoid hitting a deer on the wet road, causing the car to plunge off the bridge. But Emily remembered her father's face the week before he died. Stressed, worried, constantly looking over his shoulder, and she remembered the strange phone calls he'd been getting. She remembered that he had started keeping important documents in a locked, encrypted safe in the garage. Journalist instincts, he'd called it, being careful. Now he was dead, and Emily was alone. "Before you go," Ms. Patterson said, "there's something your parents left behind. It was in your father's safety deposit box at the bank, along with instructions that it should go to you if anything happened to them." She reached out. In the palm of her hand was a metal key, and attached to it was a label. An address was written on that label. 17, Blackwood Road, Millbrook Forest. "What is it?" Emily asked, taking the key with trembling fingers. "According to the bank records, it's the key to a property your family owned, a house in the forest outside town. Your father's instructions said you should have it when you turned 18, but given the circumstances," Ms. Patterson trailed off. "Legally, the property is yours now, though from what I understand, it's been abandoned for years, probably not worth much." Emily stared at the key. It was warm from Ms. Patterson's hand, the metal worn smooth from age. The address meant nothing to her. She had never heard her parents mention a house in the forest before. Why would they own a house they never talked about? "The van to Sunshine Haven will be here in an hour," Ms. Patterson continued. "Pack your things. Say goodbye to Shadow for now." "Shadow's coming with me," Emily interrupted. "You said they allow pets." "They do, but there's a process. Vaccination records, behavioral assessment. It might take a few days to—" "Shadow comes with me," Emily said firmly, "or I don't go." Ms. Patterson sighed. "Emily, you don't really have a choice." "Then neither do you." For a moment, they stared at each other. Then Ms. Patterson's expression softened. Okay, I'll make some calls. Shadow can come with you to Sunshine Haven. But honey, you need to understand. This is temporary. We'll find you a permanent family, a real home. This shelter is just for a few weeks while we process everything." Emily nodded her head, but she wasn't really listening. The only thing on her mind was the key she was holding and what awaited her at that mysterious address her family had left behind. That was all Emily could think about. 17. Blackwood Road. What was there? Why had her father wanted her to have it? And why did Ms. Patterson's words, "if anything happened to them," sound less like a precaution and more like a prediction? The van arrived exactly 1 hour later. Emily sat in the back seat with Shadow's head in her lap, watching the city fade into suburbs, then into forest. The driver was silent. Miss Patterson had accompanied them, making small talk about how nice Sunshine Haven was, how Emily would make friends, how everything would be okay. But Emily barely heard her. She was thinking about the key in her pocket, about her father's stressed face, about the accident that maybe wasn't an accident. Sunshine Haven appeared after 40 minutes of winding forest roads. It was a large building that had probably been a mansion once, now converted into institutional housing. Gray stone walls, barred windows disguised as decorative ironwork, a chain-link fence surrounding the property. "It looks like a prison," Emily said quietly. "It's just security," Ms. Patterson assured her, "to keep the children safe." Or to keep them in, Emily thought. The director met them at the door, a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag read, Mrs. Victoria Brennan, Director. "Welcome to Sunshine Haven, Emily," Mrs. Brennan said warmly, but Emily noticed how her gaze lingered on Shadow with obvious distaste. "And I see you've brought a dog." "Shadow," Emily said. "He's coming with me." "Of course, dear, though I should mention we have specific areas where pets are allowed, not in the dormitories, you understand. We'll set up a space in our kennel. He stays with me." Mrs. Brennan smiled faintly. "Emily, we have rules here. 23 other children who all must—" "The dog stays with her," Ms. Patterson interrupted firmly. "That was our agreement. Emily has experienced severe trauma. Shadow is her emotional support animal. If Sunshine Haven can't accommodate that, I'll find a different placement." Mrs. Brennan's expression flickered. Annoyance, calculation, then forced pleasantness. "Of course. We'll make an exception. Just this once." As Ms. Patterson said her goodbyes and promised to check in next week, Emily felt her last connection to her old life driving away. After all, she had stayed with Mrs. Patterson for quite a long time and had grown accustomed to her. She stood in the entrance hall of Sunshine Haven, with Shadow pressed against her legs and Mrs. Brennan's cold eyes evaluating her like merchandise. "Let me show you to your room," Mrs. Brennan said, "and then we'll discuss the house rules." The dormitory was exactly what Emily expected. Rows of bunk beds, children of various ages, belongings stuffed into small cubbies. Her bed was in the corner, top bunk, next to a window that looked out at the forest. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed with Shadow curled up on the floor below, Mrs. Brennan had eventually conceded that point too, but she did it reluctantly. Emily pulled out the key and studied it in the moonlight. 17 Blackwood Road. She didn't know where that was, didn't know what she'd find there. But something in her gut, the same instinct her journalist father had always trusted, told her it was important, and that Mrs. Brennan couldn't know about it. Emily quickly learned the daily routine of Sunshine Haven. She already tended to feel out of place at first in every new environment, but over time, she would adapt. Wake at 6 a.m., breakfast at 6:30, chores until 8, school lessons in the main hall until 3 p.m., dinner at 5, lights out at 8. The other children were wary at first. New kids always disrupted the fragile social balance, but Shadow won them over. A golden retriever was hard to resist, even in a place as joyless as Sunshine Haven. By day 3, Emily had learned several things. First, children did disappear from Sunshine Haven, not often, but regularly. Every few weeks a kid would be gone in the morning, and Mrs. Brennan would announce they'd been placed with a wonderful family. But no one ever got to say goodbye. No one ever sent letters. Second, Mrs. Brennan had favorites. Certain children got better food, better treatment, better everything, and those were usually the ones who disappeared. Third, there were strict rules about going outside the fence. "For your safety," Mrs. Brennan always said, but the lock was on the outside of the gate, not the inside. On her 5th night at Sunshine Haven, Emily woke to use the bathroom and heard voices drifting up from Mrs. Brennan's office below. "Be ready for pickup on Thursday night. You be ready too. Same place as always." Emily froze in the hallway. Mrs. Brennan was on the phone, her voice low but clear in the silent building. "Yes, the Chen boy and the Martinez girl, both healthy, no behavioral issues, 15,000 total." Emily's blood went cold. She knew those names. David Chen was 10, quiet and artistic. Sophia Martinez was 9, sweet and shy. Mrs. Brennan was selling them. "The transport van will arrive at midnight. I'll have them sedated so they don't make noise during transfer. And yes, the same payment method as last time." Emily was shocked by what she heard, and her heart began to race. She was scared. She needed to tell someone. But who? She couldn't tell Mrs. Patterson because she had left and wouldn't be back for a week. The police? Mrs. Brennan probably had connections. Her father had taught her that people with money and power could make problems disappear. No, Emily needed proof, evidence, the kind her investigative journalist father would have gathered. And suddenly, she thought about the key in her pocket, about a house her parents had owned but never mentioned, about her father's stressed face and mysterious phone calls. What if the house wasn't just a house? What if it was a backup plan, a place to hide evidence, to keep secrets, to prepare for the worst? Emily made a decision. She couldn't save David and Sophia by herself. They'd be gone in 2 days, and she was just 8 years old. But she could escape, could find the house, could discover what her parents had left behind, and maybe, just maybe, she could use whatever was there to take down Mrs. Brennan and save everyone. The next morning, Emily didn't go to breakfast. Instead, she decided to make a plan to escape with Shadow through the basement window she had discovered while doing chores. The lock there was broken, and the window faced the opposite side of the main building. That meant if they got out through there, no one would see them. Perfect. She had the key, a backpack with 2 days of hoarded granola bars, and Shadow. It would have to be enough. The forest was cold and damp. Thick fog surrounded them, making it difficult to see the trees. Emily walked for hours, following roads she hoped would lead to Millbrook Forest. Shadow ranged ahead, occasionally looking back to make sure she was following, his golden coat disappearing and reappearing in the fog. She had set out before dawn, and now the sun was trying to break through the clouds, but the fog prevented it. Her feet hurt. She only had sneakers, and they weren't meant for hiking. Her stomach growled. The granola bars wouldn't last long. But she kept walking. Around noon, she found a sign half hidden by overgrown bushes. Millbrook Forest, private road, no trespassing. Emily's heart leaped. This was it, the right area. The private road was barely visible, more of a dirt path than an actual street, trees pressed in from both sides, branches forming a tunnel overhead. Shadow growled softly, his hackles raised. "What is it, boy?" Emily whispered. The dog looked at her with intelligent brown eyes. It was as if it were telling her to move carefully, then continued forward cautiously. Whatever he sensed, he decided it wasn't immediately dangerous. They walked for another 30 minutes before the house appeared. Emily finally saw the house. She was shocked by how it looked, because she had never expected the last house her family left her to look like this. It looked like something from a horror movie. The house stood in a small clearing. It was 2 stories tall, its wood rotting from occasional rain, and it had no windows. The roof sagged dangerously on one side. Vines had claimed most of the exterior walls. The porch steps were half collapsed, but above the door, barely visible under years of grime, was a name carved into wood. Carter Family, Emily's family. Her name. This was her house, her property, the place her parents had owned in secret. But why? Why would they keep this place hidden? Why would they want her to have it? Shadow moved forward cautiously, sniffing the ground, the steps, the doorframe. Then he sat and looked at Emily expectantly. Safe, his posture seemed to say, or at least safer than staying out here. Emily climbed the half-collapsed steps carefully, pulled out the brass key, and slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, far more smoothly than it should have given the house's apparent age and decay. The lock had been maintained. The door swung open with a creak that made Emily wince. The interior was dark and smelled of old wood. But there was another scent as well, an unfamiliar smell she couldn't identify. Something that didn't fit with an abandoned house. Then she began to sniff carefully and realized it was the smell of coffee. Her heart started pounding as she understood. Someone had been here recently. Shadow pushed past her and trotted inside, sniffing everything. Emily followed, leaving the door open behind her in case she needed to run. The interior was dim. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through cracks between the wooden boards. Furniture sat under dusty sheets. Old photographs hung on walls. Emily recognized some faces. Her father as a young man, her mother in her 20s. There were people she didn't recognize, but the dust wasn't as thick as it should be, and on the floor, barely visible, were footprints, fresh ones. "Hello?" Emily called out, her voice small and scared. "Is anyone here?" Only silence answered. Shadow had found a doorway in the back of the house. He pawed at it insistently. Emily crossed the room, stepping carefully over questionable floorboards. The door opened onto a staircase leading down to a basement, and from below she could see a faint light. If your family had a secret house and you thought it was abandoned, but then realized someone was actually living there, what would you do? Emily's hand found Shadow's collar. "Together?" she whispered. The dog's tail wagged once, slowly, as if they were saying we should move together. They descended into the basement side by side. The basement was nothing like the house above. It was clean, organized, lived in. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, powered by what looked like a small generator in the corner. Against one wall was a cot with fresh blankets. Against another, shelves stocked with canned food, water bottles, first aid supplies, a small camping stove, a battery-powered radio, and covering every available surface were papers, documents, photographs, maps, all carefully organized and labeled. Emily stood frozen, trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't just a basement, it was a bunker. A safe room, a place designed for someone to hide. Shadow moved to the corner and picked up something in his mouth, a notebook with a worn leather cover. He brought it to Emily and dropped it at her feet. With trembling hands, Emily picked it up and opened to the first page. The handwriting was achingly familiar, her mother's precise script. If Emily is reading this, then something has happened to us. And if something has happened to us, it's because they found out what David was investigating. Emily couldn't stay on her feet and collapsed to the ground, continuing to read. Shadow leaned against her legs to support her. "Your father wasn't just a journalist, Emily. He was investigating one of the largest corporate fraud cases in history. Mitchell Energy Corporation has been dumping toxic waste in low-income neighborhoods for over 20 years. They've caused cancer clusters, birth defects, poisoned water supplies. And they've been covering it up, bribing officials, falsifying reports, threatening anyone who spoke out. David spent 3 years gathering evidence. Everything is here in this basement, documents, testimonies, proof that Mitchell Energy knew about the contamination and continued anyway. The evidence could bring down the entire company, could result in criminal charges for the executives, could mean billions in restitution for the victims. But they found out what David was doing. They threatened us, offered bribes first, then threats. We installed this basement as a safe room 2 years ago. We hoped we'd never need it. If you're reading this, we were wrong. The documents are in the filing cabinet. The flash drive with all digital evidence is taped under the second shelf. Your father made 3 copies of everything and stored them in different locations. This is one of them. Emily, I know you're young. I know this is unfair, but please, please take these documents to the police, to the FBI, to someone who can use them to bring Mitchell Energy to justice. Don't let your father's work die with him. And Emily, please know that we loved you more than anything. Every decision we made, every risk we took, was to make the world safer for you and children like you. Be brave, sweetheart. Be smart, and trust Shadow. He'll protect you. Love always, Mom. Emily read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her parents hadn't died in an accident. They'd been murdered, killed to silence her father's investigation, and now Emily was sitting in a basement full of evidence that could destroy the people who'd killed them. Shadow whined and licked her face, tasting the tears. "They killed them," Emily whispered to the dog. "They killed Mom and Dad because Dad was trying to help people." She stood up, wiped her eyes, and looked around the basement with new understanding. This was her father's legacy, his final story, the truth he'd died trying to tell. And Emily would finish it. She promised herself that she would complete the work her father had left unfinished. She moved to the filing cabinet and pulled out the first folder. Inside were medical records, children with rare cancers, all living near Mitchell Energy facilities. Birth defects documented by doctors who'd been told to keep quiet. Water quality reports that had been altered before submission to the EPA. The evidence she had seen was solid, undeniably so. In the second drawer, she found testimony transcripts from whistleblowers, Mitchell Energy employees who'd tried to report the contamination and been fired, threatened, or worse. And in the bottom drawer, she found something that made her blood run cold, a list of names under the heading Neutralized Threats. Her father's name was fourth on the list, marked with a red X. There were 17 other names, all marked with red X's. 17 people Mitchell Energy had neutralized, 17 people who'd tried to expose the truth and paid for it with their lives. Emily was staring at the list when Shadow's hackles suddenly raised. The dog turned toward the basement stairs and growled, low and dangerous. Above them, floorboards creaked. Someone was in the house. Emily immediately turned off the light, and the basement plunged into pitch darkness. You couldn't see a thing. Through the gaps in the floorboards above, she could see moving shadows, flashlight beams cutting through the abandoned house. "Spread out," a man's voice commanded. "Check every room. The kid's tracks led here. She's got to be inside somewhere." How did they find her? Had Mrs. Brennan reported her missing? Had someone followed her from Sunshine Haven? The sound of footsteps was growing more and more numerous. This place is a dump. Why would anyone come here? Because the Carter girl is smarter than you think. Her father owned this property. If she found out about it somehow, she might have come looking for answers. Emily's breath caught. These men knew about her father, about the house, about everything. What if she found the evidence? Then we make sure she doesn't leave with it. Shadow growled again, deeper this time. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck, trying to keep him quiet. The dog trembled with barely restrained aggression, every instinct telling him to protect her. "Did you hear that?" one of the voices said. Sounded like a dog. They moved toward the basement. Emily could tell from the footsteps that they were getting closer. Emily looked around frantically in the darkness. The basement had only one entrance, the stairs. If they came down, she was trapped. But wait. Her mother's letter mentioned this was a safe room. Safe rooms had emergency exits, didn't they? Emily felt along the walls desperately. Her hands found wooden shelves, the generator, the filing cabinet. There. Behind the shelf unit, her fingers touched metal. A handle. She pulled. The shelf swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow tunnel barely 3 feet high, an escape route. Above them, the basement door creaked open. Someone's been here recently. The generator's still warm. Flashlight beams began to penetrate the darkness below. Emily grabbed the leather notebook, shoved it in her backpack, and crawled into the tunnel with Shadow right behind her. She pulled the shelf closed just as the first man's boots hit the basement stairs. The tunnel was pitch black and smelled of earth and old stone. Emily crawled forward on hands and knees, Shadow's breath warm on her ankles, moving as fast and quiet as she could. Behind them, she heard the men enter the basement. "Check everything. If the documents are here, we burn the place down. No evidence left." The tunnel seemed to go on forever. Emily's knees ached. Her hands scraped against rough stone. But she kept crawling. Finally, she saw light ahead, dim forest twilight filtering through a grate. Emily pushed the grate open and emerged into dense underbrush about 50 yards from the house. Shadow squeezed through behind her and immediately pressed close, alert and protective. Through the trees, Emily could see the house. The men were still inside, but they'd turned on lights, making it easy to count them. 4 men, all large, professional-looking, searching systematically. And then one of them found the basement. "Got something," he shouted. "Filing cabinets full of documents and a journal." Emily's heart sank. They'd found the evidence. Everything her father had died collecting, gone. But wait, she had the leather journal, her mother's letter, and she felt in her pocket the flash drive. Her mother said it was taped under the second shelf. Emily had grabbed it instinctively when she found the tunnel, shoving it in her pocket without thinking. She had the digital evidence. Everything else might be lost, but she had the core of her father's investigation on a tiny flash drive smaller than her thumb. As she watched, smoke began to curl from the house's windows. They were burning it, destroying everything. Emily wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to run back and save the evidence, but Shadow pulled on her jacket with his teeth, gentle but insistent. Time to go. Time to survive. They ran. Emily ran through the forest until her lungs felt like they were failing and the muscles in her legs were burning. Behind her, flames now consumed her family's secret house. Orange light flickered through the trees, casting dancing shadows that looked like pursuing figures. Shadow stayed close, occasionally looking back to make sure no one was following. When Emily finally couldn't run anymore, she collapsed against a tree trunk, gasping for breath. Shadow immediately positioned himself between her and the direction they'd come from, ears pricked, body tense. "We're safe," Emily whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince the dog or herself. "We got away. We have the flash drive. We can still—" But then what? She was 8 years old, alone in a forest, with evidence of corporate murder on a flash drive, and 4 men somewhere behind her who wanted her dead. Who could she go to? The police. What if Mitchell Energy had paid off local cops like they'd paid off EPA officials? Ms. Patterson? She was just a social worker. What could she do against a billion-dollar corporation? Emily pulled out the leather journal and the flash drive, examining them in the fading twilight. Everything her father had died for was on this tiny piece of technology. Medical records, testimony, proof of contamination, evidence of murder, and she had no idea what to do with it. Shadow whined softly and nudged her hand with his nose. The gesture was so gentle, so full of concern, that Emily wrapped her arms around his neck and cried. She cried for her parents, killed for trying to do the right thing. She cried for the children poisoned by Mitchell Energy's waste. She cried for David Chen and Sophia Martinez, who would be sold by Mrs. Brennan in 2 days. She cried for herself, a scared 8-year-old who just wanted her family back. Shadow didn't move, just stood there and let her cry, warm and solid and alive. When Emily finally ran out of tears, she wiped her face on her sleeve and opened the journal again, looking for anything that might help. Her mother's handwriting filled page after page, notes about her father's investigation, contact information for sources, observations about Mitchell Energy's operations. And then, near the back, Emily found something. A name and address, circled multiple times in red ink. Thomas Morrison, investigative journalist, Portland Tribune, 55047. Below it, her mother had written, "If anything happens to us, Tom will help. He's the only one David trusted completely. Former colleague, now editor. Good man. Will protect Emily." Emily stared at the name. Thomas Morrison. A journalist like her father. Someone her parents had trusted. Could she trust him too? She checked the journal's margin notes. Her mother had written the address of the Tribune's office and even sketched a rough map from Millbrook Forest to Portland, about 60 miles away. 60 miles. On foot, that would take days, but Emily didn't have days. Mitchell Energy's men were hunting her. Mrs. Brennan might have already reported her missing. Time was running out for David and Sophia. Shadow suddenly stood, hackles raised, looking back the way they had come. In the distance, Emily heard voices. Flashlight beams cut through the darkening forest. She can't have gone far. A kid and a dog leave tracks. They'd found her trail. Emily scrambled to her feet, shoving the journal and flash drive deep into her backpack. "We have to go, Shadow, now." They ran again. It took Emily 2 hours of stumbling through darkness to reach the highway. She emerged from the tree line onto the shoulder of a 2-lane road, exhausted and filthy. Shadow looked better than she felt. The dog was built for this kind of endurance. But Emily's feet were blistered, her clothes were torn from branches, and she hadn't eaten since the granola bar at noon. The highway stretched in both directions, empty in the late evening. Occasional cars passed, their headlights sweeping over Emily before vanishing into the darkness. She needed to get to Portland, to find Thomas Morrison. But how? A semi-truck roared past, and Emily jumped back from the windblast. Then she had an idea. Truckers. Her father had once told her that long-haul truckers saw everything on the highways, knew all the routes, sometimes helped people who needed it. Could she flag one down, ask for a ride? But what if the driver called the police? What if they took her back to Sunshine Haven? What if— Shadow barked once, sharp and urgent. Emily turned to see headlights approaching from behind. Not on the highway, but on the forest road she'd just left. A black SUV moving fast, Mitchell Energy's men. They'd followed her trail to the highway. Emily looked around frantically. No trees close enough to hide in, no buildings, just open road and the SUV getting closer. Then she saw it. A truck stop about a 1/4 mile ahead, lights blazing in the darkness. gas pumps, a small diner, big rigs parked in rows. "Run!" Emily grabbed Shadow's collar and they sprinted down the highway shoulder. Behind them, the SUV's engine roared as it spotted them. Emily burst into the truck stop parking lot with Shadow at her heels and the SUV seconds behind them. The lot was full of parked trucks, their diesel engines rumbling. A few drivers stood outside smoking, others walked toward the diner. Emily ducked between two trailers, pulling Shadow with her. The SUV screeched into the lot. Through the gap between trailers, Emily watched 4 men exit, the same ones from the house. They split up, searching between vehicles. "Little girl with a dog," one called out loudly. "Anyone seen a kid?" Emily pressed herself against the cold metal of a trailer, Shadow rigid beside her. If the men found her here, with witnesses around, would they still try to take her? Or would they wait until she left and, "Hey, what's going on?" A new voice. Emily peeked around the trailer to see a large man in his 50s approaching the searchers. He wore a flannel shirt and trucker cap and had the kind of face that looked like it didn't tolerate nonsense. "Police business," one of the Mitchell Energy men said, flashing something that might have been a badge. "Looking for a runaway. Dangerous situation. Have you seen a young girl?" "Police?" The trucker spat on the ground. "You boys don't look like any cops I've seen, and I've seen plenty." Other truckers were starting to notice the commotion. Several moved closer, forming a loose circle around the 4 men. "Sir, I need you to step back." "You need to leave," the first trucker interrupted. "This is private property. You want to search? You get a real warrant from real police, not whatever fake badge you just flashed." The Mitchell Energy men exchanged glances. They were outnumbered now. At least a dozen truckers had gathered, and more were coming out of the diner. Could strangers actually protect her just because it was the right thing to do? "We'll be back," one of the men said. "Tell the kid that running only makes it worse." They returned to their SUV and drove away, but slowly. Not like they were giving up, more like they were waiting. Emily waited until the vehicle's taillights disappeared before emerging from her hiding spot. She stepped into the open, and immediately every trucker turned to look at her. Shadow growled protectively, positioning himself between Emily and the crowd. The first trucker, his name tag read Earl, knelt down to her level, moving slowly so he wouldn't scare her. "Those men looking for you, kid," Emily nodded. "They the good guys or the bad guys?" "Bad," Emily whispered. "Very bad. They killed my parents." Earl's expression hardened. He stood and looked at the other truckers. "Anybody got a problem with helping a kid in trouble?" Silence. Then, one by one, the truckers shook their heads. "Didn't think so," Earl said. He looked back at Emily. "Where are you trying to get to?" "Portland, the Tribune building. I need to find a journalist named Thomas Morrison." "That's 60 miles. "I know." Earl studied her for a long moment. Then, "I'm heading to Seattle. Goes right through Portland. You and your dog can ride with me. But I'm calling the authorities when we get there. Whatever trouble you're in, adults need to handle it." Emily wanted to argue, wanted to say she couldn't trust anyone official, but she was exhausted, scared, and out of options. "Okay," she agreed. Earl's rig was one of the big ones, a blue Peterbilt with a sleeper cab. He helped Emily and Shadow climb in, then walked around to the driver's side. "Those men are going to be watching the highway," he said as he started the engine, "so we're going to take the scenic route, logging roads through the mountains, slower but safer." As the truck pulled out of the lot, Emily looked back to see the black SUV parked in the shadows across the street. Waiting, watching. Earl saw it too. "Yeah, they're not giving up easy. Good thing I know these roads better than they do. Hang on, kid." He turned onto a barely visible dirt road, and the truck disappeared into the forest. They reached Portland just after dawn. Emily had slept fitfully in the sleeper cab, Shadow curled up beside her, Earl driving through the night on winding mountain roads. When she woke, the city was spread out below them, bridges spanning the river, buildings catching the morning light. "Tribune's downtown," Earl said. "I can drop you 2 blocks away, but that's as far as I go. I've got a delivery schedule." "Thank you," Emily said, "for helping me." "Thank your dog. Any kid with a golden retriever that loyal is probably worth saving." He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You sure about this journalist? You trust him?" Emily pulled out her mother's journal and showed him the circled name. "My parents trusted him. That's enough for me." Earl nodded and didn't ask more questions. He dropped them in a busy downtown area, traffic already building for morning rush hour. Before Emily could climb down, he handed her a $20 bill. For food. And kid, whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. Those men back at the truck stop, they had the look of people who've done bad things before and will do them again. I know, Emily said quietly. That's why I have to stop them. The Tribune building was 10 stories of glass and steel. Emily stood outside for a moment, shadow beside her, gathering courage. She was about to walk into a newspaper office and tell them her father had been murdered by Mitchell Energy Corporation. They might not believe her, might think she was crazy, might call social services and send her back to Sunshine Haven. But she had to try. Emily pushed through the revolving door. The lobby was busy with journalists hurrying to and from elevators, carrying coffee and files and laptops. A security guard sat at the front desk, and he immediately noticed Emily. A disheveled 8-year-old with a golden retriever wasn't exactly a common sight. "Can I help you?" he asked, not unkindly. "I need to see Thomas Morrison. It's about David Carter." The guard's expression changed slightly. "David Carter, the investigative journalist? He was my father." The guard studied her face, and Emily saw the moment he recognized the resemblance. "Wait here." He picked up a phone and made a call. 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and a man in his 50s stepped out, tall, graying hair, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt like he'd been at work all night. He looked at Emily, and his face went pale. "You look just like your mother," he said softly. "I'm Tom Morrison. Come with me." Morrison's office was on the 7th floor, a cluttered space filled with filing cabinets, awards on the walls, and a desk buried under papers. He cleared a chair for Emily and got water for Shadow, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone used to handling unexpected situations. "I was at your parents' funeral," he said, sitting across from Emily. "Car accident, they said. But your father had called me the week before, said he was close to breaking a huge story, asked me to be ready to publish if anything happened to him." Emily pulled out the flash drive and journal, setting them on his desk. "It wasn't an accident. Mitchell Energy killed them, and this is the evidence." Morrison stared at the items like they were bombs. Then he picked up the journal with shaking hands and began to read. Emily watched his expression change, shock, anger, horror, determination, as he absorbed what her mother had written. When he finished, he looked at Emily with new respect. "How did you get this?" "Your father had hidden his evidence. We've been searching for months." Emily told him everything. Sunshine Haven, Mrs. Brennan planning to sell children, the key, the house, the basement bunker. The flash drive taped under the shelf, the men who'd burned the house and chased her through the forest. Morrison listened without interrupting, typing notes on his laptop as she talked. "Okay," he said when she finished. "First priority is keeping you safe. Mitchell Energy has billions of dollars and decades of practice covering up crimes. If they know you have this evidence, they'll come for you." "I know," Emily said. "They already tried." "Second priority is verifying everything on this flash drive and getting the story published, but that takes time. We need to contact sources, verify documents, build an airtight case. We can't just publish accusations against a Fortune 500 company without proof." How long?" "A week, maybe 2. "David and Sophia don't have 2 weeks," Emily said urgently. "Mrs. Brennan is selling them Thursday night. That's tomorrow." Morrison's expression darkened. "This woman at Sunshine Haven, you're certain she's trafficking children?" "I heard her on the phone. 15,000 total. Transport van at midnight." What else could that mean? Morrison picked up his phone. "I'm calling the FBI. This is their jurisdiction." What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm just a kid making things up? "They'll believe the evidence," Morrison said firmly, "and they'll believe me when I tell them David Carter's daughter risked her life to bring this information forward." He made the call. 30 minutes later, 2 FBI agents arrived at the Tribune, Special Agent Linda Torres and Special Agent Marcus Webb. Torres was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. Webb was younger, intense, with the look of someone who took his job very seriously. Emily told her story for the 3rd time that day, showing them the flash drive and journal, explaining about Sunshine Haven and Mrs. Brennan's trafficking operation. Torres listened carefully, asking detailed questions about dates, times, exact words Emily had heard. Webb took notes, his expression growing grimmer. "If what you're saying is true," Torres said when Emily finished, "we have less than 30 hours before 2 children are sold into trafficking. We need to move fast." "What about Mitchell Energy?" Morrison asked. "The evidence on that flash drive is important, but not urgent," Torres interrupted. "Corporate fraud cases take months to build, but child trafficking, that we can stop tonight if we act now." She looked at Emily. "We're going to need your full cooperation. You'll have to testify about what you heard Mrs. Brennan say. You'll have to show us Sunshine Haven's layout, and you'll have to be brave when this goes to trial." "I can do that," Emily said. "But what about the other evidence? My father died to get it. I can't let that be for nothing." "It won't be," Webb promised. "We'll investigate Mitchell Energy too, but first things first, we save David and Sophia." Torres made a series of phone calls, assembling a team. Webb examined the flash drive, pulling up files on his laptop and whistling softly at what he saw. "This is incredible," he muttered. "Medical records, testimony, internal emails. Mitchell Energy executives knew about the contamination for 20 years and covered it up. This is criminal negligence, environmental crimes, possibly manslaughter. And murder," Emily added quietly. "My father's name is on their list. 17 people they neutralized." Webb's expression went cold. "We'll get them, all of them, I promise you that." Morrison had been making calls too. "I'm reaching out to every journalist who worked with your father. We're going to publish this story in every major newspaper simultaneously. By the time Mitchell Energy's lawyers wake up, the truth will be everywhere." Emily felt something uncurl in her chest, relief, hope. Justice was actually possible. "But first," Torres said, standing up, "we need to raid Sunshine Haven and shut down Mrs. Brennan's operation. Emily, can you show us the building's layout?" Emily grabbed paper and started drawing from memory. The dormitories, Mrs. Brennan's office, the basement exits, the fence around the property. As she drew, she thought about David and Sophia, about the other children at Sunshine Haven who'd been living in fear, about all the kids who'd disappeared before her, sold to who knows where. Tomorrow night, it would end. Mrs. Brennan would be arrested, David and Sophia would be safe, justice would be served. Her father would be proud. Agent Torres assembled her team in a conference room at the FBI field office. Emily sat in a chair too big for her, shadow lying at her feet while federal agents planned the raid on Sunshine Haven. Morrison had stayed with her, refusing to leave until he knew she was safe. "Sunset is at 7:43 p.m., Torres said, pointing to a map of the property Emily had drawn. "Mrs. Brennan said the transport van arrives at midnight. We'll position teams here, here, and here." She indicated spots on the perimeter. "Starting at 11 p.m., when the van arrives, we move in simultaneously, arrest everyone involved, secure all children, collect evidence." "What about Emily?" Morrison asked. "She's been through enough. Does she need to be there?" Torres looked at Emily. "Technically, no. We have enough to act on. But if Mrs. Brennan tries to deny everything, having the witness who overheard her might—" "I'll be there," Emily interrupted. "I want to see her arrested. I want David and Sophia to know someone came for them." "It could be dangerous," Webb warned. "Being at Sunshine Haven was dangerous," Emily countered. "Running through the forest while men with guns chased me was dangerous. This is justice." Torres smiled slightly. "You're David Carter's daughter, all right. Okay, you can be there, but you stay in an FBI vehicle the entire time. No arguments." Emily nodded. She could accept that. "What about protective custody?" Morrison asked. "Mitchell Energy knows she has the evidence. They'll try again." "Already arranged," Torres said. "Safe house, 24-hour protection until we can arrest the Mitchell executives and neutralize the threat. Emily will be placed with a carefully vetted foster family who has experience with witness protection." The thought of another foster family made Emily's stomach clench. But it was better than being dead. And once Mitchell Energy's executives were arrested, maybe she could have a normal life again, if there was such a thing as normal after everything that had happened. "Timeline," Torres continued. "Tonight at 11 p.m. we raid Sunshine Haven. Tomorrow morning, we execute search warrants on Mitchell Energy's corporate offices. By tomorrow afternoon, we'll have enough to arrest their executives. By next week, we shut down the entire operation." "And the story?" Morrison asked. "Embargo until after the arrests," Torres said. "We can't risk tipping them off, But once we have them in custody, you can publish everything." Morrison nodded, satisfied. Emily looked at the clock on the wall. 2:47 p.m. 8 hours until the raid. 8 hours until Mrs. Brennan's operation ended. 8 hours until justice. The FBI safe house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Emily sat in the living room with Shadow, eating the first real meal she'd had in days. Pasta and garlic bread delivered by agents who seemed determined to make sure she wasn't hungry. 2 agents were stationed outside. 2 more monitored security cameras. Morrison had gone back to the Tribune to prepare the story, but promised to return before the raid. Torres and Webb were coordinating with their teams. Emily should have been exhausted, should have been sleeping, but her mind wouldn't shut off. She kept thinking about David and Sophia, about how scared they must be. Did they know they were going to be sold? Had Mrs. Brennan told them, or would it be a surprise when they were dragged from their beds at midnight? She thought about her parents, working for years to expose Mitchell Energy, knowing the danger but doing it anyway because it was right. She thought about the 17 names on that list, 17 people who'd tried to speak truth and been silenced. Not anymore. At 10 p.m., Torres called, "We're moving into position. Are you ready?" "Yes," Emily said. A black SUV picked her up. Official FBI this time, not Mitchell Energy. Shadow jumped in beside her, and they drove through the night toward Sunshine Haven. The forest was dark, trees forming walls on either side of the road. Emily remembered running through these woods, terrified and alone. Now she was returning with federal agents and the power to end Mrs. Brennan's operation. Funny how things changed. The SUV parked on a hill overlooking Sunshine Haven. Through night vision binoculars, Emily could see the building, lights on in Mrs. Brennan's office, dormitories dark, the fence surrounding everything like a prison. "All teams in position," Torres's voice came through the radio. "Target building is quiet. We wait for the van." 11:30 p.m. No movement. 11:45 p.m. A light turned on in one of the dormitories. Mrs. Brennan probably getting David and Sophia ready. 11:58 p.m. Headlights appeared on the access road. A white van, no markings, approaching slowly. Emily's heart raced. This was it. The van pulled up to Sunshine Haven's main entrance. The driver got out, a large man in dark clothing. He knocked on the door. Mrs. Brennan answered, all smiles, like she was welcoming a guest instead of selling children. "All units," Torres commanded. "Go, go, go!" FBI vehicles surged forward from 3 directions. Agents in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn, surrounding the building. "FBI, everyone on the ground! Hands where we can see them!" Mrs. Brennan's face went from smiling to shocked to terrified in seconds. The van driver tried to run, made it maybe 10 feet before agents tackled him. Through the SUV window, Emily watched agents swarm into Sunshine Haven. Lights blazed on throughout the building, children's voices, confused, scared, asking what was happening. "All subjects secured," Torres reported. "Building is clear. Sweeping for evidence now." Emily saw agents leading Mrs. Brennan out in handcuffs. The woman was yelling, demanding lawyers, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. But her expression when she saw the FBI badges was pure guilt. Then Emily saw them, David and Sophia, wrapped in blankets, being led out by a female agent. They looked terrified but unharmed, safe. Emily wanted to run to them, wanted to explain that she'd escaped and brought help, that they were free now. But she stayed in the SUV, watching justice happen, and let herself smile for the first time in days. They'd done it. Mrs. Brennan was arrested. David and Sophia were safe. 23 children would wake up tomorrow in a world where they weren't merchandise anymore. Her father would be proud. The next morning, Emily woke in the FBI safe house to the sound of her face on every news channel. Breaking news. 8-year-old whistleblower exposes corporate murder and child trafficking ring. She sat on the couch with Shadow, watching reporters stand outside Mitchell Energy's corporate headquarters while federal agents executed search warrants. The footage showed executives being led out in handcuffs, boxes of evidence being loaded into trucks, employees looking shocked and confused. Thomas Morrison appeared on one channel, being interviewed outside the Tribune building. David Carter spent 3 years investigating Mitchell Energy Corporation's illegal dumping of toxic waste. He documented cancer clusters in low-income neighborhoods, falsified EPA reports, bribed officials, and a systematic cover-up that lasted 2 decades. When Mitchell Energy discovered his investigation, they had him killed, made it look like a car accident, but David's daughter, Emily Carter, found the evidence he'd hidden and brought it to authorities. Today, we're publishing the full story. The screen showed photos Emily recognized from the flash drive: contaminated water supplies, children with cancer, internal Mitchell Energy emails discussing the cover-up. Agent Torres entered the living room carrying coffee and looking satisfied. "We arrested 7 Mitchell Energy executives this morning. CEO Richard Parsons, COO Susan Chen, Head of Environmental Compliance Marcus Webb, all in custody. The evidence on your father's flash drive is even more damning than we initially thought." "What happens now?" Emily asked. "Federal prosecutors are building cases for environmental crimes, criminal negligence, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice. We're talking hundreds of felony charges combined. These people are going to prison for the rest of their lives." Emily felt something loosen in her chest. Justice. Real, actual justice for her parents. "What about the victims?" she asked. "The people who got sick from the contamination?" "Class action lawsuit being filed today," Torres said. "With the evidence your father collected, it's a slam dunk. Mitchell Energy will pay billions in restitution, medical care for victims, environmental cleanup, punitive damages, everything." Morrison called an hour later. "The story's breaking everywhere. New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, BBC. Your father's investigation is front-page news worldwide. And Emily, people are calling him a hero. They're right." That afternoon, Agent Webb arrived with news about Sunshine Haven. "We found Mrs. Brennan's records. She's been running this trafficking operation for 6 years, 29 children sold in that time. We've located 17 of them so far. Some were domestic workers, some in agricultural labor, 2 in factories, all being rescued as we speak." Emily thought about those children, working as slaves while Mrs. Brennan got rich. What happens to her? Federal trial for human trafficking, racketeering, child endangerment. She's looking at life without parole, same as the Mitchell Energy executives. "Good," Emily said quietly. Shadow rested his head in her lap and she scratched behind his ears. Her parents were gone. That pain would never fully heal, but at least their killers would face consequences. At least the truth was out. FBI forensic analysts spent 3 days examining every file on her father's flash drive. Emily was brought to the FBI field office to help identify documents and explain her father's investigation methods. She sat in a conference room with Torres, Webb, Morrison, and a team of prosecutors, walking them through years of her father's work. "This file contains medical records from St. Mary's Hospital," Emily explained, pointing to the screen. Dad interviewed Dr. Patricia Wong, the oncologist who noticed the cancer cluster. She said the hospital administration told her to stop asking questions about why so many children from the same neighborhood were getting rare cancers. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Janet Mills, took notes. "Is Dr. Wong willing to testify?" "She died 2 years ago," Torres said grimly. "Car accident." Everyone in the room went quiet. Another name for the list of people Mitchell Energy had neutralized. "But we have her recorded testimony," Webb added, pulling up an audio file. "David Carter interviewed her extensively before her death. It's all here." They worked through file after file. Birth defect records from 3 different hospitals, water quality tests showing contamination levels 50 times higher than safe limits. Internal Mitchell Energy emails where executives discussed the contamination and decided covering it up was cheaper than fixing it. One email made Emily's blood boil. "Environmental remediation would cost 400 million and tank our stock price. Better to pay off a few complainers and bury the problem. Legal estimates 20 million in settlements versus 400 in cleanup." Easy math. The email was signed by CEO Richard Parsons. "They knew," Emily said, her voice shaking with anger. "They knew they were poisoning children and they did it anyway because it was cheaper." Mills looked at her with something like sympathy. "Your father documented everything perfectly. This evidence is going to destroy them in court." Over the next week, Emily gave multiple depositions. She explained how her father had worked, where he'd hidden evidence, why he'd been so careful. She identified voices on recordings, verified documents, filled in gaps in the timeline. It was exhausting, but every deposition brought them closer to justice. 2 weeks after Mrs. Brennan's arrest, Emily met the children who'd been rescued from Sunshine Haven. The FBI had placed all 23 kids in temporary foster care while they searched for permanent families. David Chen and Sofia Martinez were being evaluated by trauma specialists, preparing to testify at Mrs. Brennan's trial. Torres arranged for Emily to visit them at a counseling center in downtown Portland. David was exactly as Emily remembered, quiet, artistic, with sad eyes that had seen too much. He was drawing when Emily entered, sketching trees and mountains with surprising skill. "You came back," he said without looking up from his paper. "Mrs. Brennan said you died trying to escape, that we'd die too if we ran." "She lied about everything," Emily said, sitting beside him. Shadow immediately moved to David's other side, offering his head for petting. "I found evidence of what she was doing. I brought the FBI. You're safe now. Because of you. Because my parents taught me that truth matters, that justice is worth fighting for even when it's hard." David finally looked at her. "Your parents sound amazing." "They were," Emily said softly. Sophia was harder to reach. The 9-year-old barely spoke, sitting curled in a chair with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When Emily approached, Sophia flinched. "It's okay," Emily said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just wanted to make sure you're safe." "Mrs. Brennan said the people buying me would be nice," Sophia whispered. "She said they'd give me a real family." I almost believed her. Emily's heart broke. "You'll get a real family, a good one. People who want you because they love you, not because they paid for you." "How do you know?" "Because there are good people in the world. I've met some of them. FBI agents who work all night to save kids, truckers who give rides to runaways, journalists who risk everything to tell the truth. They're out there, and they're going to make sure you're safe." Sophia looked at her with tentative hope. "Are you safe?" Emily thought about the FBI protection, the safe house, the knowledge that Mitchell Energy's executives were in jail. "I'm getting there." Over the next month, Emily visited the Sunshine Haven survivors regularly. She told them about her parents' investigation, about finding the evidence, about the importance of speaking truth even when powerful people wanted silence. Some of the kids started calling her their hero. Emily always corrected them. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who had evidence and used it. The real heroes are people like my dad, who spent years gathering that evidence knowing it might get him killed. Heroes are the doctors who reported the cancer clusters, even when hospitals told them to stop. Heroes are the FBI agents working to find every child who was sold. I'm just a kid who got lucky and refused to give up." But privately, she thought maybe her father would be proud of how she'd handled things. Maybe her mother would smile at how Emily had protected the evidence and made sure their work wasn't wasted. That was enough. 4 months after Emily found the flash drive, the first trial began. Mitchell Energy Corporation versus the United States of America. The trial was held in federal court, with Emily sitting in the gallery between Morrison and her new foster mother, Alice Chen, a kind woman in her 50s who'd been thoroughly vetted by the FBI and had experience fostering children who'd been through trauma. Shadow sat at Emily's feet in his official service dog vest, providing the comfort she needed to face what was coming. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by Janet Mills, who'd spent months building an airtight case. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about corporate greed causing deliberate harm to innocent children. Mitchell Energy Corporation knew that their waste disposal facilities were contaminating groundwater in low-income neighborhoods. They knew children were drinking poisoned water. They knew cancer rates were spiking. And they made a calculated decision that paying off complainers was cheaper than fixing the problem. Mills showed the jury photos of sick children, contaminated water samples, and the damning email from CEO Richard Parsons. The defense will try to convince you this was negligence, an unfortunate accident, something that couldn't have been prevented. But the evidence will show this was murder. Premeditated, calculated murder driven by profit margins and stock prices. And when investigative journalist David Carter threatened to expose them, They added his name to a list of 17 people they neutralized, their word, not mine, to protect their secrets. The defense tried to paint Mitchell Energy as a victim of overzealous regulation and opportunistic plaintiffs. They claimed the contamination was unintentional, that the company had acted in good faith, that David Carter's death was truly just an accident. But the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Patricia Wong's recorded testimony detailing her concerns about cancer clusters, water quality tests showing contamination levels, internal emails discussing cover-up strategies, financial records showing payments to silence complainers, and the list, 17 names, all marked with red X's, all people who died under suspicious circumstances while investigating Mitchell Energy. The star witness was Emily herself. When Mills called her to the stand, Emily walked forward with Shadow beside her. The judge allowed the service dog after Mills explained Emily's trauma. Please state your name for the record. Emily Carter, daughter of David and Jennifer Carter. Emily, can you tell the jury about the evidence you found? Emily told the story again. The key, the house, the basement bunker, her father's investigation, the flash drive. She explained how her parents had prepared for the worst, how they'd hidden evidence in case Mitchell Energy succeeded in killing them. And they did kill them, Emily said, her voice steady despite the tears. The police said it was an accident, but it wasn't. My father's name is on their list, number 4. They murdered him to stop his investigation. The defense attorney tried to discredit her during cross-examination. Miss Carter, you're 9 years old. Isn't it possible you misunderstood what you found? That your grief has caused you to see conspiracy where there's only tragedy? Emily looked at the jury. I'm 9, but I can read. I can see photos of dying children. I can understand emails saying, bury the problem and neutralize threats. And I know my father didn't drive off a bridge by accident. He was murdered because he cared more about truth than his own safety. Several jurors were nodding. The defense attorney wisely didn't press further. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Dozens of witnesses testified, doctors, environmental scientists, former Mitchell Energy employees who'd tried to report the contamination, families who'd lost children to cancer. When the verdict came, Emily was there. On the charge of criminal environmental contamination, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. Guilty on all 47 counts. CEO Richard Parsons was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. The other executives received similar sentences. Mitchell Energy Corporation was fined $12 billion in punitive damages and ordered to pay $8 billion in restitution to victims. The company declared bankruptcy within a week. Emily watched the news coverage from Alice's living room, Shadow's head in her lap. Your father did this, Morrison said, sitting beside her. 3 years of dangerous investigation, countless risks, and he got them. Even after they killed him, his evidence brought them down. We did it together, Emily corrected. Dad gathered the evidence, Mom preserved it. I found it and got it to the right people. And you published the story. It took all of us. Morrison smiled. David would be so proud of you. Emily thought about her father's face, his constant stress those last months, his determination to expose the truth no matter the cost. I hope so. The $8 billion in restitution was divided among victims and their families. Families who'd lost children to cancer received compensation. People with ongoing medical needs from contamination received lifetime healthcare funding. Communities affected by Mitchell Energy's dumping received money for environmental cleanup and health monitoring. And Emily, as David Carter's heir, received a substantial settlement, not because she'd been directly harmed by contamination, but because her father's work had made the case possible. $4 million, more money than Emily could comprehend. Morrison helped her understand what it meant. You could live comfortably for life, pay for college, buy a house, never worry about money. Or I could use it to help others, Emily said, like my dad would have wanted. She worked with Morrison and Alice to establish the David and Jennifer Carter Foundation for Investigative Justice. The foundation would fund journalists investigating corporate crime, provide legal support for whistleblowers, and offer financial assistance to families harmed by corporate negligence. Half of Emily's settlement went to the foundation. The other half was placed in trust for her education and future. But there was one more group Emily wanted to help: the Sunshine Haven survivors. Mrs. Brennan's trial had revealed the full scope of her trafficking operation. 29 children sold over 6 years. Most had been recovered, but the trauma they'd endured would last a lifetime. Emily donated $1 million to create a support fund specifically for trafficking survivors: therapy, education, housing assistance, everything they'd need to rebuild their lives. When David Chen heard about it, he cried, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Emily said. "My dad taught me that money is just a tool. What matters is what you build with it." Victoria Brennan's trial was shorter than Mitchell Energy's, but no less satisfying. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing payments from buyers, testimony from survivors, Emily's account of the phone call she'd overheard. Mrs. Brennan tried to claim she'd been helping children find homes, that the money was just administrative fees, that she'd never intended harm. But 29 rescued children told different stories. Stories of being sold to families who worked them as servants, of being told they were worthless, of living in fear and isolation. When Emily testified, Mrs. Brennan glared at her with pure hatred. "You ruined everything," she hissed as Emily passed the defense table. Emily stopped and looked at her former captor. "No, you ruined everything when you decided children were products to sell. I just made sure you faced consequences." Mrs. Brennan was convicted on 43 counts of human trafficking and sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. As bailiffs led her away, Emily felt nothing but relief. Another monster locked away, another victory for justice. 6 months after finding the flash drive, Emily stood in family court for her adoption hearing. Alice Chen had been fostering her since the FBI placed her in protective custody. In those months, Alice had become family, helping with nightmares, supporting Emily through testimony, encouraging her foundation work. Now, Alice wanted to make it permanent. Judge Sarah Kim looked at Emily kindly. "Miss Carter, do you want to be adopted by Alice Chen?" "Yes, Your Honor, more than anything." "Why?" Emily thought about it. "Because she chose me. Not because she had to, not because someone paid her, but because she wanted to. She's been to every trial, every therapy session, every foundation meeting. She makes me feel safe. And she loved Shadow from day one." At the mention of his name, Shadow's tail thumped against the floor. Judge Kim smiled. "That's exactly what family should be. Emily Carter, as of this moment, you are legally the daughter of Alice Chen. Your new name is Emily Carter Chen, keeping your parents' name while adding your new families." The gavel fell, and Alice pulled Emily into a hug, both of them crying happy tears. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Alice whispered. "Home," Emily repeated. Finally, after months of chaos and fear and loss, she had a home again. Morrison, who'd attended the hearing, hugged them both. "David and Jennifer would love this. They'd love knowing you found a family who deserves you." That evening, Emily sat in her new bedroom, really her room, not temporary, not just until something better came along, and wrote in her journal. "Dear Mom and Dad, I found the evidence you hid. I brought down Mitchell Energy and Mrs. Brennan. Justice was served. Your work wasn't wasted. I miss you every day. But I'm okay. I found a new family. I have Shadow. I'm using the settlement money to help others like you would have wanted. I promise to keep fighting for truth, to keep exposing injustice, to keep making the world better. I love you to the moon and back. Emily." She closed the journal and looked at Shadow, curled up on his bed in the corner. "We did it, boy. We finished what they started." Shadow's tail wagged once in acknowledgement. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside, Emily felt something she hadn't felt since before her parents died: peace. 14-year-old Emily Carter Chen stood at the rebuilt house on Blackwood Road, looking at the historical marker that had been installed 6 months ago. The Carter House, where investigative journalist David Carter preserved evidence that exposed Mitchell Energy Corporation's decades-long cover-up. In 2026, his daughter Emily found that evidence and brought justice. 5 years. So much had changed. Shadow was gone, passed away 2 years ago at 16. Emily still missed him every day, But she had a new golden retriever now, a puppy named Justice who sat patiently beside her. The house itself had been repaired and turned into a memorial. The basement where her father had hidden evidence was now a museum exhibit, showing visitors the importance of investigative journalism and whistleblower protection. "Ready?" Alice Chen, Emily's adoptive mother, called from the car. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Today was special. The David and Jennifer Carter Foundation, built with Emily's $4 million settlement, was unveiling the Shadow Initiative. 17 golden retrievers trained as service dogs would be matched with child trauma survivors. Emily had insisted on the name. Shadow had saved her life. Other children deserved that same loyal love. At the Foundation's headquarters in Portland, Emily watched 17 children meet their new dogs. One girl, maybe 9, with haunted eyes, knelt beside her golden retriever and burst into tears. "His name is Cooper," the trainer said gently, "and he's yours forever." "Forever," the girl whispered. "Forever." Emily smiled. She remembered that feeling, finding something loyal and loving when the world felt impossibly dark. The Foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. 20 million in assets now, 47 whistleblowers supported, 12 major corporate crimes exposed, over 2,000 families helped. David Chen was there, now 15, volunteering as a peer counselor. Sophia Martinez ran a survivor support group. All 29 children from Sunshine Haven had been found and were healing. Mrs. Brennan had died in prison. The Mitchell Energy executives were serving life sentences. Justice had been served. That evening, Emily gave a speech to the Foundation's donors. 5 years ago, I was 8 and running for my life. I found my father's evidence and made a choice, hide or fight. I chose to fight. Because of that choice, Mitchell Energy's executives are in prison. Hundreds of poisoned families got compensation, and Mrs. Brennan's trafficking ring was destroyed. She paused. But the work isn't done. There are still corporations covering up crimes, still children being trafficked. That's why this foundation exists, because my father taught me that truth matters and one person with courage can change the world. Standing ovation, 5 minutes of applause. Later, Thomas Morrison found her in the Foundation's library. "Your dad would be incredibly proud. You took his evidence and built something that will help people for generations." Emily looked at her father's Pulitzer Prize, awarded posthumously. "I miss them every day, but I know they'd be happy with what we've done." "They're watching," Morrison said, "and they're proud." 22-year-old Emily Carter Chen addressed students at Columbia School of Journalism. "When I was 8, I found evidence my father hid before he was murdered. That evidence brought down the largest corporate criminal case in history. Today, I'm here to tell you that journalism matters, investigation matters, speaking truth to power is a responsibility." She'd graduated college at 19, now ran the Foundation full-time, and had already published award-winning investigations. The Foundation had a $50 million endowment. All Sunshine Haven survivors were thriving. My father's investigation cost him his life, but saved hundreds. That's the bargain we make as journalists. We risk everything to tell the truth. And when truth wins, when justice is served, that's worth any cost. After her lecture, Emily visited the house one final time. In the basement museum, beside her father's photo, was a quote she'd written. "My father taught me that one person with truth is stronger than an army with lies. His evidence brought down a corporation. His courage inspired a movement. His legacy lives on in every journalist who fights for justice. This house is proof that good people doing brave things can change the world. Thank you, Dad. I'll keep fighting. Always." Emily Carter Chen. Justice pressed against her legs. Emily scratched his ears. "Come on, boy, we have work to do." Because truth didn't rest, justice didn't wait, and Emily would spend her life continuing her parents' work, one investigation at a time. Her parents would be proud. If you had gone through what Emily experienced, what path would you have chosen? And if you've ever learned something shocking about your family that you didn't know before, share it in the comments.